third and final part of the video tutorial about how to make the rag rugs. And this is about creating the style you want and the shape of what you want and how then to attach it to itself. So as you've seen from the past, I have braided, like pre-braided things already that I've rolled up into balls, and I have 3 different ones out here. This one, this one, and this one. This one I made from, a lot of this is with blue jean, so this is a much thicker braid. So I'm not sure yet if I want to use this one in this particular rug or not, because it is a much different thickness, as you can see, than some of the thinner materials that I used. So I'm not sure yet if I'm going to use this one because it's just so heavy duty and everything. When I made the rolls with soft stretch knits, they're a lot closer in size, as you can see here, and so they'll be a little bit more even when you put them into the rug next to each other. So I'm probably just going to use most of these for this rug. I might add some others. Okay, so about shaping, you can start like if you want to do a circle, the circle is the easiest one to do. The circle, I have the knot that I tied at the end of this. You can leave that there, or if you want to, you can just take a needle and thread or a sewing machine and just sew across the end so then it's a nice flat end, whatever, doesn't matter. If you leave the knot because you don't want to sew it or whatever, you're going to cut it off after you are finished with the rug, because that's not going to be part of your rug at all. It's just going to kind of sit on top until you get it all stitched down to the point where you want it. Okay, for a round rug, you just start in the middle. You lay the braid down flat, and then you just kind of bend it around and around and around itself. I'll show you a little bit of how that will work out. And then it just builds in on top of each other, like so. And then you end up with a round rug. This is like the first thing that I did, the first braided rug that I did, that I just finished earlier today. That's to make it round. You just go round and round, starting at the center with the end of the knot. Okay. If you want to make an oval, you would stretch out a bit, like a certain length. The longer the length that you start with, the longer your rug will be. And if you use a shorter length, then it will be a wider rug to use up your braids. To make an oval, what you do is you lay out that little section for yourself, and then you continue. You just bring it up alongside itself, and then you continue on around, just like you did with the circle. But now you're going around a longer thing, and then you'll work your way around, and it will be more of an oval shape. I'll show you in a second. So then it would just build on from there. To make it more square, there are a couple options. You can start and then kind of zigzag your way the length you want, like this, and then it would be straight on the edges, and you could sew them together so it would be straight. Or you could do multiple braids. You could do them all. You could just lay them out the length you want, and you could just make them look like a striped one. That's a possibility. Also, if you want to, you can sew multiple braids together to start, and say you want to make a round one, but you want to do it with the 2 different braids. What will happen is you'll end up getting this spiral lollipop look type of thing going on in your rug, in your design, like this. And it would be more of a spiral lollipop hypnosis type of pattern. And if you want to do a spiral, that would be for a circular. And then you can also do the squares and the rectangulars and the ovals with 2 or more. So then you would have a spiral pattern in an oval shape, for instance. You can do it that way if you want. It'll still have that. See how it's like kind of a striped pattern? It'll be for the length of the thing. So for mine that I'm getting ready to start tonight, I'm actually going to use the middle part as with the braid that I just did in the last video. And I want it to be an oval braid. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this end where I just tied it off, right? You can put this over here wherever you want. It doesn't matter. You can set it up how you think you want it to go. I recommend definitely doing it on a table or some flat surface because otherwise it can start to get very, it gets very, it'll push upwards or have all these big lumps and bumpies. But this way you can make sure that it stays flat when you're sewing it together on a flat surface. And you don't want it to be like tight, because if you pull it super tight in some areas, it's going to do that, or it's going to pull this up. So then you'll have bumps in your rug, which you don't want. So you just want it to be nice and loose and just sit down nice and flat and make it all pretty. I am going to untie this knot, and I'm going to actually sew the end of this because it's easier for me that way. So I have my needle and thread here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a few stitches just over the end so that these three pieces are tied together with the string. Just take a couple stitches, so that is secured and I don't have to have that knot with all that extra material. So you can just run a couple stitches like that. Doesn't matter as long as the needle and thread goes through all three of the strands. It doesn't really matter if it's pretty or not. It doesn't matter at all, really. You just tie it. I like to do the couple stitches and then just tie a little brief knot. It's just a way to secure it so that you have a good place to start for the center of your rug. So now I'm going to just tie that into a knot. Trying to get so you can see my needle. I'm just tying a real quick knot. I'm using upholstery thread because it's stronger and I don't want to have to fix stuff a lot because I already didn't finish this for like 6 years. So any upkeep that is not ADHD friendly is not really something I care about right now. So let me just tie this up into a knot, and then I'm going to cut my string and cut off the ends of this unbraided part. So just do that real quick. Okay. Okay. That knot is done. So I cut off my thread, and then I cut off these unbraided bits of extra fabric that were at the end of the thing. So now I have a piece that's like this. It's held together just with a couple stitches. It's not that important because it's about to get stitched to something else. Okay. So let me tie the knot back on my needle and thread. I'm sure there are faster ways to do this, but I don't know what they are because I just do what I feel like. And so I just attach it by hand because it's easier for me to do that. So let me tie this knot. Now, in my room, I have a longer space. It's not as wide of a space, but it's longer. And so I want to make a rug that will go down by my bed, on the side of my bed. So I'm going to actually start with a fairly long central piece because I wanted to make this one into the oval. So I won't stitch anything quite yet. I'm going to just stick this into this little ball of the other braid. Anyway, so I have a chunk. I'm guessing it's about 2 feet that I have set out here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up here to the top, right back here, back to the beginning of the thing that I just tied into tied off and sewed together. And what I'm going to do is right now I'm going to just do a couple anchoring stitches. And what you do is you just kind of stick it into the one braid, pull it out, and then you have your little knot. And then you go into the opposite braid, poke it through, go through a couple layers of the stuff, other braid of the, well, it's technically the same braid, but the other row or whatever you're gonna call it. Anyway, so let me just do that real quick. You pull it through, but then you make a little, you go through the hole that you just made. So I go across to the other braid and then push it back through into the middle of the braid closest to me. And then I pull it out a little ways. And then there's this little loop that is gonna get pulled in by the, I can't know if you can see that it's a white thread, but anyway, so there's a little loop, and so you can just take the needle and go right through that loop to make that little knot to just tie it down there. And it bears note that if you always sew from the, like when you're attaching it to itself and everything like that, if you sew on the same side, then when you're finished with your rug, you can flip it over and none of your little strings or knots or anything like that will show, and it will just be a nice pretty little rug. So now that I've got this end secured, I'm going to lay this out so that it's laying flat. Both braids are laying flat. And then I'm going to just work along. I do a fairly simple, like a ladder stitch, where you go in one side, come out maybe, I don't know, depends however much you feel like, maybe ½ inch or so into another part of the same braid, and then you pull that needle out like this until it's done. And then making sure, the important part is to make sure that it's always laying flat. But then you go to the other side, you poke it in, and then you come out a little ways down in the same braid, maybe ½ inch or so, 3/4 inch that time. And then you go pull it out, making sure it's tight. Again, every time you're doing this, every stitch you make, just make sure that it's laying down flat. And don't pull on it, because this, like I'm using stretch knits, and so there is quite a lot of give, and you don't want that. You just want it to be nice and relaxed so that it doesn't pull any stitches, make anything stick out. Anyway, so you continue like this, in one side, out the same side, then over to the other side, with your stitch, like a ladder stitch, so that it's connecting both of the braids for all intents and purposes. And then I like to, every once in a while, I make every 3 or 4 inches, I like to tie it off and do a couple knots there, so that if, when your rug is finished, you say you accidentally catch it on a nail or something, and so some stitches come out. If you have knots every couple inches, then you only have to repair a little bit instead of a lot of a bit, which is really annoying if you have ever lost a string to, you know, one string on a shirt, and then you pull it and it keeps going and going and going until the whole thing is undone. It's just like that. So I'm going to, I've gone about, I'd say about 4 inches, probably 4 inches that I've sewn together. So now I'm going to make a couple knots. Again, I'm making sure that this is staying flat. I just go into the opposite side, do that little loop thing I just showed you before. I go through both braids, right? And then just as I'm about to pull all of this thread through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right through that hoop that I just did. I'm going to pull that down tight. I'm going to do a couple of those each time when I knot it down. And so then you just continue like that. And you're gonna finish sewing the whole length of this, and then around and around and around and around and around until you run out of where you want to switch braids. And when you want to switch braids, what you'll do is you'll have the end of this braid, like your next braid, and you can either braid it into the end of the other braid, or you can sew it off again like you did at the beginning of this, and then just sew it together and continue around, and then you have your whole rug. Thank you.